I disagree with the thought that Trump did what he did to establish authoritarian principles or ideologies or to establish himself as an authoritarian. Gavin Newsom failed to uphold his moral duty in protecting the federal agents by when they started to be attacked by citizens. I disagree with the thought that Trump did what he did to establish authoritarian principles or ideologies or to establish himself as an authoritarian. Gavin Newsom failed to uphold his moral duty in protecting the federal agents by when they started to be attacked by citizens. So
Does
as
that
a
apply to
result of
Trump
that,
too?
huh?
Does that apply to Trump?
Well, what do you mean? Does that apply to Trump? So Trump had to do what he did in order to protect the
Or
federal
does it
agents.
apply on No, on January 6th, does it apply there? Because he didn't send in the National Guard to protect people.
So people, there was no federal investigation going on at January 6th. That was just a riot.
There's no federal. I don't understand what you're saying. He didn't send in the National Guard there. So wouldn't that make him responsible
So,
for failing the agents there?
so the difference is ICE was operating under federal authority to investigate and detain, and they were held against their will and physically attacked. The local authority can't assist in the arresting or investigation or upholding a federal law, but they can protect the agents from being attacked, which is where
Right.
Gavin failed.
Right, but didn't Trump fail on January 6th?
So, what federal investigation was taking place January 6th?
Why does a federal investigation need to be a qualifier? And what I don't know what federal investigation you're talking about. Like, federal agents were assaulted.
ICE?
No, federal agents were assaulted.
So, ICE is a federal agency. They uphold the federal immigration laws.
I'm aware.
They have the authority, the same authority as the FBI and Fish and Wildlife. They are a federal agency.
Right, right, but why doesn't that extend to January 6th? Donald Trump allowed federal officers to be assaulted and didn't call in the National Guard.
What federal officers were being assaulted?
There are federal officers at the Capitol. The Capitol Police are federal.
So there was no investigation
Not
being
just them.
impeded. Do you understand?
Why does there need to be an investigation being impeded to call the National Guard? That's not a
Because
qualifier of calling in the National
that is a
Guard.
felony in itself.
So I
Okay,
don't
so if
understand
there
what
was
you're
no
arguing.
investigation taking place January 6th,
Why does an investigation have to do with you said morally? So
yeah.
why are you arguing with me? Why does a federal investigation have to do with Donald Trump morally failing federal officers
So Gavin Newsom has
on
a legal
January
and
6th?
moral duty to uphold the federal law.
He doesn't.
Yes, he does.
No, he
No, he
doesn't. He
doesn't.
has no federal obligation to uphold. He has no obligation to hold up federal law.
So you're saying states can override federal
No,
laws?
but they don't have to act. No, but they don't have to act.
So what does
And
that mean
what
if
did
they
Newsom
don't?
do?
He failed to
So you
act.
see,
That's why the National
isn't it
Guard was
really
deployed.
funny? Isn't it really funny when protests happen in blue states, right? When a Republican's in office, they blame the governor. When a protest happens in blue states, when protests happen when a Democrat's in office, they blame the Democrat. What point does Trump get fucking? At what point does he get responsibility? Did he not fail federal officers? Did he call in the National Guard on January 6th? No, he didn't.
The
So he would have
incident that
failed.
took
He would have
place
failed those.
on January 6th, there was no officers being assaulted and stopped from in their lawful duty of investigating. Like they were doing their job. And because the
Stop
citizens,
saying investigating. Okay, where is investigation a qualifier here? Where in the law? Why would it matter? Because if you're talking about impeding an investigation, you're talking about the law, right? What does investigation have to do with assaulting federal officers?
so was ICE arresting people January 6th?
What are you not understanding? where are you getting this idea that investigation matters? You're adding a qualifier of investigation. Like, this is what people do when they're when they're losing arguments or when you can't substantiate your point. You
Well, no,
take the
there's a
fact that
difference. So you just
hold on, you
lack
take
the
the
understanding of the difference in situations.
I don't lack the understanding. You do, and are oblivious to it.
So
Why
there
would
was no
investigation?
investigation
Why would
being
listen,
impeded on
listen,
January
listen?
6th.
Why? Shut the. Oh my God! What are you not getting? Why? Where? Who? What? Where? When? Why? And how is investigation important for the purpose that you're making? Does it mean that if an investigation wasn't happening with ICE, that you wouldn't blame Newsom? That's what you're saying.
The National Guard would have never been deployed.
That's not the fucking question. If you can't answer the question, dude, you're gonna have to go. You're purposefully dodging the question. That was the easy. You could have lied there. He could have lied there,
Wouldn't have to be
and he
placed
couldn't
on
even
anybody
lie there.
because there would be no
He
National
couldn't lie.
Guard.
So if ICE wasn't conducting an investigation, then Newsom's not in the wrong.
So
It's
if
like he broke.
ICE, so just to be clear, so if ICE wasn't arresting people and people weren't assaulting the officers trying to make those arrests, would Gavin be responsible for the deployment of the National Guard, which would have been sent to not protect anybody because ICE wouldn't have been present? Did I get that
Oh
right?
my fucking God! Do you want a cork board with some tacks and some string? It's not a difficult concept. How did you do that? How did you manage to fuck this up that badly? It's not that difficult of a concept.
Remove the one qualifying factor.
You're adding a qualifier for no reason. Why is the qualifier relevant?
It's reality. That is what happened, and that is why things transpired.
I'm just asking you to explain to me how the qualifier matters.
How the qualifier matters. So there were raids taking place, and people were interfering with those raids. And because Gavin didn't deploy local police to arrest the people committing felonies, the National Guard had to be sent in. Are you following?
Okay.
That's not how this worked.
I don't know how to explain this to you. Okay, I made a comparison between what's happening in LA and what happened on January 6th. Wait, listen. Okay? I made a comparison between what happened in LA and what happened on January 6th, and they were a one-to-one comparison. You were talking about a failure of Newsom to deal with people assaulting federal officers, which, by the way, if it's a widespread protest, this is a bullshit argument, but we'll just accept it for purposes of the argument. You're saying that Newsom is responsible for failure protecting federal troops. That's what you're saying, right? Or federal workers. And then on the other side, I'm saying, well, then Donald Trump didn't call in the National Guard on January 6th, so he didn't protect workers. And you're saying, no, there was an investigation going on with ICE. But what does that have to do with the failure to protect them?
So I'm going to explain this to you one more time. Had Gavin sent police to protect
my fucking God, don't stop talking. Stop talking. I'm going to be honest with you. We're done with this conversation. I'm going to be totally honest with you. Disrespectfully. Your ability to reason and ration is so profoundly bad. I'm shocked.
Oh no, you're just
shocked. No. I'm honestly shocked you can formulate.
I will
sentences.
not allow you to make.
Oh no, we're done with this conversation. We're done with this conversation. That was professionally unintelligent. Like he does it for work.
Yeah, I had
Paige, thoughts?
I had to kick him from Mel's live just about 15 minutes ago. So I'm not surprised.
Okay.
One thing, he didn't seem to make a connection that he's kind of sticking up for the ICE officers, they're being attacked, but he wouldn't apply that to Jan 6 Capitol officers because there wasn't an
right. It's a simple.
It's so weird. He's so ugh.
Right. What does investigation have to do? It doesn't have anything to do. They basically like this is an argument tactic that they use where they take a singular point that has nothing to do with it. There's a term for this, by the way.
Oh, I know.
But they take a single, yeah.
Oh, what's it called? It's where they talk about the Bailey. Is that it?
No, this one's not a Mont and Bailey. It's like they take, it's kind of similar. They take, sorry, Paige, I gotta hit you with the it's kind of similar. They take, sorry, that was the wind. I turned that on. They take a single point of contention, and then they hyperfixate on it, so that because there's no way for me to argue that you think this qualifier is important, right? If you just like dig in and put your heels in the ground, and you're like, no, well, because of this, it doesn't have anything to do with anything. It's irrelevant as hell, and they just hyperfixate on it so that they can say like, well, this is a qualifier, this is a qualifier, this is a qualifier. It is a type of red herring, but I think there's a specific type of name for it. But they do it all the time. I watch it and they just dig their heels in. They go, but this qualifier, this qualifier, this qualifier, so they can make them non relevant. And as far as a debate tactic goes, it's a relatively effective one because, like you say, like I sit there and I'm just like, can you make this make sense? How is this any different? Why does this qualifier matter? And he just completely deflects and just goes into, that the like ignores. So basically starts off on this entire framing that this is for some reason important, and then everything they say after that is meant to reinforce that. So but I'm going to be real. Professionally unintelligent.